movies. I have my whole life. I know that's a controversial opinion to have. I mean, who actually likes things? I've always been one of those insufferable people who can't really tell you what my favorite genre or my favorite thing in any type of media is. For movies, I usually default to Jerome Bixby's The Man from Earth, which is really great, and you should immediately watch it after you finish this video. Well, you should watch it after you watch the movie that I'm going to talk about in this video, and then you should watch The Man from Earth. It's hard for me to pick favorites because rather than liking big, easily identifiable stuff, I have favorite small details about things. So in The Man from Earth, I really enjoy it for its engaging dialogue and how it creates this really interesting premise for the viewer to question and think about and talk about after the movie is over. The plot of the film is basically just a series of question and answers about a really outlandish scenario. The whole thing takes place in a single house where at one point everyone is just sitting on the floor and talking. So with that in mind, when I sat down to watch Hippopotamus, I was happily surprised. Hippopotamus is an indie film. The kind of movie where before you show it to someone you have to say, okay, just keep in mind it's a little weird. But if you do keep that open mind, it's really enjoyable. It isn't for everyone though. It doesn't have any flashy action sequences or fancy landscapes. It's mostly just two people sitting in the same room talking. What's interesting is what they talk about. I've been down every internet rabbit hole I could find and talked to everyone I could about this movie. There's a Reddit thread from early last year that still periodically gets responses like every few weeks where random people watch the movie and seek out discussion online. Hippopotamus made me think about the nature of linear storytelling and how easy it is to trick your audience into thinking that the story is unfolding in a linear fashion when really it isn't. I spent a full 3 days laying awake at night and thinking about the different timelines presented to us in the movie and what visual clues could mean in the movie, and finally I started writing. One of the two characters is Ruby. She wakes up in a stark white room with no memory at all and no functionality in her legs. Her captor Tom tells her that he has kidnapped her.
My name is Thomas Allcroft. You will remain captive until you fall in love with me.
Wait, Corpse, is that you?
Choke me like you hate me, but you love me low-key.
He gives her a weirdly rehearsed speech about how he's kidnapped her and cut the ligaments in her legs so she can't walk. She is to remain his captive until she falls in love with him. He lists what the schedule of meals and bathroom breaks will be because, of course, he has to pick her up and carry her to the toilet and goes to leave. She asks if he has raped her, and he doesn't really react except to pause before exiting the room. Ruby scoots around to investigate her surroundings, and through a series of unfortunate events, she barely makes it back to the wall in time for Tom to return. He gives her a massive dose of some type of pill, and the next thing we see is her waking up again in the same room with no idea where she is. Tom gives her the same speech as before, this time with the addition of a line saying that he has no sexual intentions toward her. Still, though, she asks him if he raped her. His reaction is not great. Ruby finds a tennis ball in her back pocket that she'd hidden there in the last timeline we were shown before her memories were reset, and is visibly confused as to why it's there. So now we know 3 things. Tom is playing with her memories somehow. He hasn't really injured her, though he is very invested in her believing that he has, and Ruby has been in this room for a lot longer than she realizes. These 3 things are the keys to unlocking the timelines presented to us in the movie. In this type of film, you can be sure that most, if not all, of the things you see on screen are there on purpose. Things like Ruby's hairstyle changing from a bandage on her head to without it from one shot to another in the same scene, or from scene to scene in the same sequence, tells us that she has been through a lot of these exact same scenarios over and over again, and the audience is actually skipping around in time, though it is all being presented in a linear way. Tom slowly presents her with comforts, things he has brought to her before in other reset memory timelines. The book he brings her triggers a memory, and Tom reveals that he has always been jealous of how much attention she paid that book. She finds phrases like "don't trust him" written backward in the book, viewable with the compact mirror from her bag. At first, she thinks this message has been left by some other victim of Tom's before her. Then the memory comes back of herself writing these words. When she pulls out the brick hiding her treasure trove of used matches that functioned as her writing tools, the audience and Ruby are left to wonder how many times she has stolen a match to leave a new message for her future self. She has figured out that the injuries on her legs and head were fake, and she can actually walk fine. She still has to act like she can't when she knows Tom is watching, though. Tom triggers more and more memories for Ruby. An awkward love confession at a high school dance, a dinner where he gives her a beautiful gift, and eventually he recounts the unbelievable story of him saving her from being raped by her flatmate and accidentally killing the man. Ruby's head was apparently injured in the attack, and instead of fleeing to a hospital, Tom took her to this isolated place and figured out how to manipulate the memories of someone with retrograde amnesia. I won't spoil anything else about the plot until the very end of this video because it's so much better if you watch it yourself and come up with your own theories first. We spent a solid 3 days or so going back and forth about our theories for the film at this point, and she said that she has actually made lists for herself of the type of person that she is. Things like favorite foods, favorite books, movies, general likes and dislikes. She said that it was because if she was ever in a position where she had head trauma or something caused amnesia, she wouldn't want to be vulnerable to the influence of a potentially manipulative person trying to mold her into the perfect girlfriend for them. That might be content. Amnesia is a popular plot device in all sorts of things. If I stopped a random person on the street and asked them to name something where a character has amnesia, they could probably come up with a lot pretty quickly. I looked up a list of just what Wikipedia has for movies about amnesia, and there are some old favorites on there. We've got Your 50 First Dates, The Notebook, and The Vow, a movie that's one musical cue away from being a horror movie. It's not just a list of romances, though. There's some action movies, some thrillers, some horror movies, and really just about any genre you can think of. And it's also not even just movies. It's a commonly used device in anime, all genres of books, TV shows, comic books, video games. In the anime Vampire Knight, the main character Yuki goes most of the series with amnesia, and you eventually find out that her brother fiance has just been hanging out and watching her and manipulating her for her entire life ever since the day she lost her memories. Now, from here on, I am going to be talking in a general sense. I am aware that there are exceptions to what I'm going to be talking about, but an exception does not disprove a general trend. When amnesia is used as a plot device in anything, and the main character is a woman, the story typically revolves around how little agency she has or how vulnerable she is. It's likely to be a dramatic romance a la The Notebook or the dark timeline version of that story in Hippopotamus. The woman doesn't know who she is, but the man she loves is right there to tell her everything she needs to know. If it's not a romantic story and is instead a thriller or horror story, the amnesia is used to make the woman more vulnerable and sad. Now, contrast that with some of the more well-known uses of amnesia with men as the subject. The Bourne Identity, Memento, I've forgotten how many people I've killed and all I've got is this knife, so I guess I better start over at zero. They get to keep agency in their own story. Their journey revolves around punching people until they figure out who they were. Their potential sadness is eclipsed by anger or sassy one-liners. This is why Hippopotamus is so interesting to me. From here on out, I will be revealing some massive plot spoilers for the end of the movie. If you haven't seen the movie yet, please pause this and go watch it, then come back. Okay? Okay. Okay, so Tom takes away Ruby's agency as a character and tries to create the perfect girlfriend for himself. If we take what he says as the truth, which I don't for the record, but I'll get into that later, then he saved her from a violent attack and then absconded with her into the wilderness and held her captive for months while he prepared this weird kidnapper dungeon instead of doing literally anything else, mainly taking her to a hospital so she could get, actual medical help. This brings me back to that fear that my coworker was talking about. To me, it seems pretty clear that Tom is lying, and he's just trying to manipulate her. Ruby has a memory of Tom on top of her at one point, separate from his deliberately triggering a memory of her attack. She also consistently asks if he her in the scenes of her waking up with no other memories, which to me hints that he may have actually been the one who attacked her. Maybe they used to date and she left him, or was trying to and he didn't like that, so he attacked her and brought her to his kidnapper den and tries to build a bitch from the ground up and alters her memories and frames them in a way that suits him. The human mind is a controversial subject. We don't have as firm a grasp on our own memories as we like to think we do. We don't fully understand the exact way that consciousness works or how memories form. Memories are malleable, easily manipulated, and it's possible to completely make them up and not even realize what you've done. It's why eyewitness testimonies often contradict each other. 5 people could watch the same crime unfold and come away with wildly different accounts of what happened. That's not even getting into false memories. False memories uncovered in therapy contributed heavily to things like the satanic panic. The nature of memory and consciousness is a little outside my area of expertise, but there is a lot of fun listening that I can recommend if you want to learn more about that specific instances of false memories and stuff. I'll search around and put some links in the description. Every time Tom gets a defective model of Ruby, he shakes his little reset pill bottle and starts over, building a new model from the ground up. The way he gives her these pieces of her life to trigger memories and then immediately gives her the framework through which to view those memories is a fantastic deconstruction of the story told in The Notebook. Where Tom has to try and convince Ruby they were in love, Noah just reads the story day after day, and with no extra prompting, Allie remembers everything. Despite Tom's best efforts to reframe her memories in his favor, Ruby remembers her fear and anger toward him. And eventually that fear and anger can't be reset, and she lashes out violently at him. I love looking at Hippopotamus as a deconstruction of The Notebook, even just comparing the final scenes of the 2 films. In The Notebook, after remembering everything, they die together in each other's arms, content. Ruby has gone through this cycle of remembering and forgetting so many times, many of those times ending with having sex with Tom, after which her memories get reset again. She wakes up in his arms, thinking that she remembers everything, then her face shifts, possibly as more of her life comes back to her, and she stabs him, finally ending her own torment. Like I said in the beginning, this movie isn't for everyone, but the conversation it brings about the nature of memory and linear storytelling have it down as a favorite in my book. The way it further made me consider the role of women in stories about amnesia boosted it even more. I hope if you've watched this whole video, you've decided to watch the movie too. It was hard for me to watch because I typically have to do something with my hands when I'm watching anything, and something about it just sucked me in, which is good because there's a lot of tiny details on screen that I would have missed if I didn't. I did miss a lot the first time, even though I was watching it. Like when Ruby notices her own initials on the drawings above the sink and the timeline with her hair in the braid. Or in the end, I thought her hair was actually down, and so it was in the hair down timeline, but it was actually in a braid that had half fallen out while she was asleep. Which of course made me wonder if it was the same braid timeline where she noticed her initials on the drawing. Do you see what I mean about rabbit holes? It's really easy to get started with them once you start connecting dots and realizing that there's these different timelines presented in the movie. I feel like a conspiracy theorist, but only for this one specific thing. I hope you enjoyed this journey through a random indie movie with me. If you have a favorite story about amnesia, I guess mention it in the comments. If you do watch Hippopotamus, do you think it was all real? Do you think he was telling the truth? If he ran away because he was afraid of being taken in for murder, then how was he getting the medication for Ruby? Because his face would probably be on the news in connection with a murder and her disappearance. Does that mean he actually didn't kill anyone? Why did she have the mirror piece ready to go for the stabbing in the end? What was the drowning dream about? Why didn't she get in the boat at the end? When did the final scene as the doctor happen? If you like this video, please leave me a like. If you'd like to donate to my coffee and bread fund, then you can give me $2 or $5 or even $10 on my Patreon. Patreon.com/writingwomen. I'd love it if you did that. I'll take those yummy likes as a consolation prize. They sustain me through the long weeks between videos. My current patrons are Marriadoc Brandybuck, Ms. Psycho, Amy Chu, aka The Doctor, Lord Butterbutt, Bruce, Red, Kirsten, Olivia, and Mark. Thanks for the support. I got fancy this month with some Café Du Monde coffee. See you next time. Bye.